Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our Swadhyaya online reading retreat labs. So we are having a two series, Srimad Bhagavatam, the gate power of SAP, the gateway to spirituality, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita series. And we are continuing with the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter number 9, chapter number 11. In the last section, we have read till from verse number 8 to verse number 14. So today we are going to start with the verse number 15 onwards, 15 to 23. The return of Sita and Rama to Vaikuntha and their glories. So being forsaken by the first verse, we'll be reading from the this hard copy. So this is the ninth canto. If you do not have, you connect with the nearest discount center. You'll be books from there. And if you do not have the hard copy, now we are continuing with the from Vedabase. Okay. So let's read it from verse number 15 till verse number 23. We're going to read today. Verse number 15. Translation. Being forsaken by her husband, Sitadevi entrusted her two sons to the care of Valmiki Muni. Then, meditating upon the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra, she entered into the earth. Purport. It was impossible for Sita Devi to live in separation from Lord Ramachandra. Therefore, after entrusting her two sons to the care of Valmiki Muni, she entered into the earth. Verse number 16. Translation. After hearing the news of Mother Sita's entering the earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was certainly aggrieved. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, upon remembering the exalted qualities of Mother Sita, he couldn't check his grief in transcendental love. Purport. Lord Ramachandra's grief at the news of Sita Devi's entering the earth is not to be considered material. In the spiritual world, also there are feelings of separation, but such feelings are considered spiritual bliss. Grief and separation exist even in the absolute, but such feelings of separation in the spiritual world are transcendently blissful. Such feelings are a sign of tasya prema bhashata svabha, being under the influence of Ladini Sakti and being controlled by love. In the material world, such feelings of separation are only a perverted reflection. Text number 17, verse number 17. Translation. The attraction between men and women or male or female always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva and is the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attached to household life in this material world? Purport. As explained above, when the feelings of love and transcendental bliss from the spiritual world are pervertedly reflected in this material world, they are certainly the cause of bondage. As long as men feel attracted to women in this material world and women feel attracted to men, the bondage of repeated birth and death will continue. But in the spiritual world, where there is no fear of birth and death, such feelings of separation are the cause of transcendental bliss. In the absolute reality, there are varieties of feeling, but all of them are of the same quality of transcendental bliss. Verse number 18. After Mother Sita entered the earth, Lord Ramachandra observed complete celibacy and performed an uninterrupted Agnihotra Yajna for 13,000 years. Verse number 19. Translation. After completing the sacrifice, Lord Ramachandra, whose lotus feet were sometimes pierced by thorns when he lived in Dandakaranya, placed those lotus feet in the hearts of those who always think of him. Then he entered his own abode, the Vaikuntha planet, beyond the Brahmayoti. Purport. The lotus feet of the Lord are always a subject matter of meditation of our devotees. Sometimes, when Lord Ramachandra wandered in the forest of Dandakaranya, thorns pricked his lotus feet. The devotees often thinking of this would faint. The Lord doesn't feel pain or pleasure from any action or reaction of this natural world. But the devotees cannot tolerate even the pricking of the Lord's lotus feet by a thorn. This was the attitude of the gopis when they thought of Krishna wandering in the forest, with pebbles and grains of sand pricking his lotus feet. The tribulation in the heart of a devotee cannot be understood by karmis, gyanis, or yogis. The devotees who couldn't tolerate even thinking of the Lord's lotus feet being pricked by a thorn were again put into tribulation by thinking of the Lord's disappearance. For the Lord had to return to his abode after finishing his pastimes in this material world. The word Atmayoti is significant here. The Brahmayukti, which is greatly appreciated by Gyanis or monastic philosophers who desire to enter it for liberation, is nothing but the rays of the Lord's body. Jasya prabha prabhata jagat angunda koti susutse prasudhadi vibhuti vinnam tad brahma niskalam anantam asesa bhutam govidam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is endowed with great power. The glowing refulgence of his transcendental form is that impersonal Brahman, which is absolute, complete, and unlimited, and which displays the varieties of countless planets with their different opulences in millions and millions of universes. Brahma Samhita 5.40. The Brahma Yoti is the beginning of the spiritual world, and beyond the Brahma Yoti are the Vaikuntha planets. In other words, the Brahma Yoti stays outside the Vaikuntha planets, just as the sunshine stays outside the sun. To enter the sun planet, one must go through the sunshine. Similarly, when the Lord of his or his devotees enter the Vaikuntha planets, they go through the Brahmayoti. The Gyanis or monastic philosophers, because of their impersonal conception of the Lord, cannot enter the Vaikuntha planets, but they also cannot stay eternally in the Brahmayoti. Thus, after some time, they fall again to this material world. Aruhya Krichena Paramapadam Tatha Patanti Adho Drita Jusmat Angrayaha Bhagavatam 10.2.32. The Vaikuntha planets are covered by the Brahmajyoti, and therefore one cannot properly understand what those Vaikuntha planets are unless one is a pure devotee. Verse number 20. Now Ramachandra's reputation for having killed Ravana with swords of arrows at the request of the demigods and for having built a bridge over the ocean doesn't constitute the factual glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, whose spiritual body is always engaged in various pastimes. Lord Ramachandra has no equal or superior, and therefore he had no need to take help from the monkeys to gain victory over Ravana. Purport. Instead, in the Vedas, Svetaswara Upanishad 6.8, न तस्य कार्यं करणं च विद्यते न तत्संस सामसभ्यतिकश्च दृश्यते परास्य शक्तिर्विधेत श्रुते श्रूयते स्वभाविकी ज्ञानबलक्रियाच. The Supreme Lord has nothing to do, and no one is found to be equal or to or greater than him. For everything is done naturally and systematically by his multifarious energies. The Lord has nothing to do. Na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. Whatever he does is pastime. The Lord has no duty to perform to oblige anyone. Nonetheless, he appears to act to protect his devotees or kill his enemies. Of course, no one can be the Lord's enemy, since who could be more powerful than the Lord? There is actually no question of anyone being his enemy. But when the Lord wants to take pleasure in pastimes, he comes down to this natural world and acts like a human being, thus showing his wonderful, glorious activities to please his devotees. His devotees always want to see the Lord victorious in various varied activities, and therefore to please himself and them. The Lord sometimes agrees to act as a human being and perform wonderful, uncommon pastimes for the satisfaction of the devotees. Verse number 21. Translation. Lord Ramachandra's spotless name and fame, which vanquish all sinful reactions, are celebrated in all directions, like the ornamental cloth of the victorious elephant that conquers all directions. Great saintly persons like Markandeya Rishi still glorify his characteristics in the assemblies of great emperors like Maharaja Yudhishthira. Similarly, all the saintly kings and all the demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, worship the Lord by bowing down with their helmets. Let me offer my obeisances unto his lotus feet. Yeah. So now next verse is verse number 22. Translation. Lord Ramachandra returned to his abode to which Bhakti yogis are promoted. This is the place to which all inhabitants of Ayodhya went after they served the Lord in his manifest pastimes by offering him obeisances, touching his lotus feet, fully observing him as a father-like king, sitting or lying down with him like equals, or even just accompanying him. Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Janma karma chami divyam evam yo veti tatvata tattva deham punarjanma nati mameti. So Arjuna, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities doesn't, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Here this is confirmed. All the inhabitants of Ayodhya who saw Lord Ramachandra as citizens served him as servants, sat and talked with him as friends, or were somehow or other present during his reign when back home, back to Godhead. After giving up his the body, the devotee who becomes perfect in devotional service enters that particular universe where Lord Ramachandra or Lord Krishna is engaged in his pastimes. Then, after being trained to serve the Lord in various capacities in that Prakata Lila, the devotee is finally promoted to Sanatana Dharma, the supreme abode in the spiritual world. This Sanatana Dharma is also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Paras Tasmattu Bhavaneo Vyaktavat Sanatana. One who enters the transcendental pastimes of the Lord is called Nitya Lila Pravishta. To understand clearly why Lord Ramachandra returned, it is mentioned there that the Lord went to that particular place where the Bhakti yogis go. The impersonalists misunderstand the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam to mean that the Lord entered his own effulgence and therefore become impersonal. But the Lord is a person and his devotees are persons. Indeed, the living entities like the Lord were persons in the past and they are persons in the present and they will continue to be persons even after giving up, giving up the body. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Moving to the verse number 23. Translation: O King Parikshit, anyone who orally receives the narrations concerning the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes will ultimately be freed from the disease of envy and thus be liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. Purport. Here, in this material world, everyone is envious of someone else. Even in religious life, it is sometimes found that if one devotee has advanced in spiritual activities, other devotees are envious of him. Such envious devotees are not completely freed from the bondage of birth and death. As long as one is not completely free from the cause of birth and death, one cannot enter the Sanatana Dharma or the eternal pastimes of the Lord. One becomes envious because of being influenced by the designations of the body, but the liberated devotee has nothing to do with the body, and therefore he is completely on the transcendental platform. A devotee is never envious of anyone, even his enemy, because the devotee knows that the Lord is his supreme protector. He thinks, what harm can the so-called enemy do? Thus, a devotee is confident about his protection. The Lord says, Ye yathamam prapadyanti tams tathaiva bhajati mam. According to proportion of one's surrender unto me, I respond accordingly. A devotee must, therefore, be completely free from envy, especially of other devotees. To envy other devotees is a great offense, a Vaishnava aparadha. A devotee who constantly engages in hearing and chanting Shravana Kirtana is certainly freed from the disease of envy, and thus he becomes eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. So, with this, we have seen the return of Sita and Rama to Vaikuntha and their glorifications we have seen in today's session. So in this next session, we will continue with the verse number 24 to verse number 36. With that, we'll be completing this chapter. So stay tuned and we'll be having a Q&A session and also there will be a quiz, MCQs based on Kahoot platform. Stay tuned for that and for that you to read this chapter thoroughly. Right? So we'll stop here. Hare Krishna, Jagat Guru Prabhupada. Jai. Hare Krishna.